Hello, biologists, and welcome back to our first example of a two-trait cross. I hope you're all doing well today. It's Mr. B, and yeah, without further ado, let's jump into this. I want to frame it by saying this isn't very different than a single-trait cross. You're still going to be doing the same steps that you will have gotten used to by now, but we're just adding on another trait, so that obviously changes the way we lay things out a little bit. But just follow along here, and I think you'll be able to get it down solid. So without further ado, let's read this question, and we'll read it carefully as always. So we'll say dimples is a dominant trait. Bushy eyebrows are dominant over thin eyebrows. Right off the bat, you see it's talking about two things there. That's what we mean by a multi-trait or a two-trait problem. Bobby has bushy eyebrows and no dimples. Whitney has thin eyebrows and dimples. Bobby carries the thin eyebrow allele, and Whitney carries the non-dimple allele. That's important, the carrying idea. If Bobby and Whitney have children together, what will be the genotypic and phenotypic ratio of their children be? Um, words. Okay, so number one, we're still going to get the alleles. So take a second and figure out what you might use. I'll just show you this so we're on the same page for going through the rest of the work. But I've just set eyebrows to be B and dimples to be D, B for bushy and D for dimples. So I picked these letters because they look different as capitals and lower cases, which is great. And we've assigned which one's for the dominant and which one's for the recessive. How do we know what dominant and what recessive is? It says dimples is dominant in the first part, and it says bushy eyebrows are dominant over thin eyebrows as well. So now with that in mind, I invite you to pause the video for a second and try to figure out the genotypes of the parents. So I'll give you 3, 2, this is when you can pause it, 1. All right, let's see how we figured this out. Dimples is a dominant trait. Bushy eyebrows are dominant over thin eyebrows. Bobby has bushy eyebrows and no dimples. So right off the bat, we know that Bobby is bushy and has no dimples. The no dimples tells us that he's going to be recessive here for the D. But then, because he has bushy eyebrows, we're not sure if he's homozygous or heterozygous, but we'll come back to that later. Whitney has thin eyebrows and dimples. So thin eyebrows, that means that she's recessive for eyebrows. And she has dimples, so she has to have at least one dominant allele. But then it says Bobby carries a thin eyebrow allele. That's why Bobby's heterozygous for eyebrows. And Whitney carries the non-dimple allele, so Whitney's heterozygous for dimples. So we know that Bobby is heterozygous for bushy eyebrows and homozygous recessive for dimples. So we just put that all together as 4 letters in a row, and you have to group your B's and group your D's. Make sure you keep like the same letter beside each other. And then Whitney's homozygous recessive for eyebrows and heterozygous for dimples. Now, with this in mind, try to figure out how you might find the gametes. I know you may not have seen this already, so just give it a crack. But I invite you to pause the video. You have a few seconds here. Okay, so let's go on and take a look. Here, all we're doing is seeing all the possible combinations. If you think about FOIL and math or something. For Bobby, he has a big D here, and that can mix with a little d. He could also mix it with another little d, but that does nothing because it's the exact same. So we have, excuse me, we have big D, little d. Drinking too much kombucha. But then we also have a little b, and that can cross with the little d. So recessive, but again, crossing with this like recessive D a second time does nothing. So the two gametes that Bobby can make are the heterozygous one and the homozygous recessive. We shouldn't use that language though because it's two traits, but he can either give a dominant B allele and a recessive D allele, or a dominant B and a recessive, or a two recessive, sorry. Whitney, similarly, she only has little b's, so only has the thin eyebrow alleles. So then she can have her little b and pair it up with either a dominant allele for dimples or a recessive. So she has these two possible genotypes. With these genotypes in mind, we can just make a Punnett square like normal. So I invite you to make a Punnett square. Pause the video if you like. And great. You'll notice this Punnett square only has 4 boxes. That's because both of the parents were homozygous for something, we only end up with 2 gametes from each. So it'll look very familiar in this case. Again, we're going to put the female on top and the male on the side. So we'll just box those off like so. Then we're just going to cross them, And I want to draw your attention here. We're going to pair up the B's and the D's. You don't just write B, D, B, D or something. It's always B, B, D, D, B, B, D, D, B, B, D, D, B, B, D, D. You pair the letters together that go for a certain gene. Great. So with that in mind, pause this and take a second and think about what the genotypic and phenotypic ratios could be. Hint, you're going to have to think about two different traits when you're thinking about phenotypes. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So our genotypic ratio, we have four possibilities and four different genotypes, so it's each 1 out of 4. We have 1 out of 4 heterozygous heterozygous, 1 out of 4 heterozygous for eyebrows, but homozygous recessive for dimples, 1 out of 4 homozygous recessive for eyebrows, but heterozygous for dimples, and 1 out of 4 homozygous recessive for everything. We just see these by looking over here. Then we have to interpret those as phenotypes. So this first one, they're going to have both dominant phenotypes because they have a dominant allele for both traits. So that's bushy eyebrows and dimples, 25%. Here they have the dominant allele for eyebrows, but not for dimples. So they're going to have bushy eyebrows and no dimples. Here they're going to have thin eyebrows and dimples because they don't have a dominant allele for eyebrows, but they do for dimples. And here they're going to have thin eyebrows and no dimples. So we write that out 25% and explain what the phenotype will look like. So just make sure these questions you organize them very carefully. The next example that's going to go up very shortly is a dihybrid cross, which is very important and very essential for just kind of learning once and not remembering numbers, but pay close attention to the next video that comes up. And then after that, we'll have some further stuff in the coming days. So keep at it, biologists. You're doing great. And remember, if you have any questions at any time, email me at mrbsciencemb@gmail.com. And that'll be posted on Mr. Lloyd's website as well. Cheers.